Hello and welcome to another episode of GAMERpiece Theatre, where we take a look at classic video games and find out what made them great. Today's game is from way back in 1981 in the classic arcades. We've got the game Frogger. Yes, Frogger. A game where you control a frog as he crosses the highway, crosses the road, makes it through the swamp, and makes it safely back home on the lily pads at the end of the game screen. Now, while being an arcade hit and an arcade classic, Frogger has received many sequels, ports, and spin-offs throughout the years. We're focusing on one port here today, which is from 1982, so pretty early on, and that is Parker Brothers' Frogger for the Atari 2600. Now, there's actually two ports of Frogger on the Atari 2600. There's the Parker Brothers version that we're looking at today, and the Starpath Supercharger, an accessory sort of game kit for the 2600 that uses cassette tapes. I'm not really sure how that works. I don't have one myself, and it seems a little more complicated than the basic cart version of Parker Brothers' Frogger. In this game, you control a frog nicknamed Frogger who has to make it home at the top of the screen. You start at the bottom of the screen, and you must first cross a busy road with multiple lanes and multiple cars. And then after that, you must cross a dangerous river section. To complete one screen of this game, you have to return 5 Froggers, one for each of the spaces on the top of the screen, to complete that area and move on to the next screen, where the difficulty will then increase, and also new enemies or skills or speed will be increased as well. The basics of Frogger plays off that classic roadkill scenario of a frog crossing a road and seeing if he can survive. One of the most memorable parts of this game for many people is the road section, although at this point I've played it so much that the road section is quite easy on the first few levels, and it goes by very fast because it's the very start of the game, but it remains one of the more iconic areas of the game. The frog crossing the road, the busy road, all those cars and trucks coming at you at fast speeds. That's memorable for this game. But that's only half the game. The other half is the river sequence, which is much more challenging, and you have to be much more precise. On this home Atari 2600 version, you've got 2 game settings, A and B. They're variations, and on one version you can move from one side of the screen and loop around the other as you're moving on those logs at the end on the river section. On the other version, it'll destroy you if you reach the edge of the screen, so you gotta be careful. And I personally prefer to have it loop around. It allows it not to be easier, but I find it funner that way because you get to play longer, and it's still a challenge even with that enabled. Frogger must face many challenges on his short adventure, and one of them being the road. The road is the very start, the first half of the game essentially, and that is a road with many lanes. You've got cars and trucks coming on at you from both directions. You've got to learn how to maneuver between them and sometimes move left to right, not just forward, to dodge these vehicles. And as the game increases on the next screens, the cars will move faster and there will be more of them. Once you're at the second section of the game, the river, there's more things you have to look out for. There are turtles that you can jump on, but watch out, those turtles in those 3 patterns will sink underwater. So they have a limited amount of time when you're riding on the backs of the turtles. You gotta watch out for that. Once you're at the very top of the screen, you have 5 different locations where you can drop off Frogger to complete the game. Once you drop him off in one location, you can't drop him off in that location the next game. So you have to make sure that you're putting him in the right spot every time, and once you fill up all 5 spots, you're on to the next game screen. On the further stages of Frogger, there's not only faster gameplay, but there's new enemy types as well, such as the otters, which appear next to the logs, and snakes. And while there is a ton of things coming at you and many obstacles to face for Frogger, there is some good things for Frogger. There's a lady frog. Yes, the lady frog. If you pick up this frog, she will give you bonus points, and if you bring her all the way to the end of the level, the lily pads at the very top of the screen, then you will return her to safety and get even more points. Sometimes a fly appears at the end of the level. If you land on that fly when it's on one of your ending locations, you will get even more bonus points. So you can see at this game that there's many ways to earn points, and there's many ways to make it through this screen. Although it's just a one-screen experience on a small arcade screen, it does have a lot going for it. There's a lot moving on screen at one time. There's cars, trucks, everything's moving all at one time. It never slows down, and nothing stops except for Frogger when you're waiting. But you can't wait for too long, because there's a timer as well. Yes, you have a timer. Every time you start out a new Frogger, you have a timer. Once you make it to one Frogger to the top of the screen, or you lose a Frogger, that timer then resets. So you can keep going if you make it up to the top fast enough. Frogger has a huge presence in arcade history. It's phenomenally huge. Parker Brothers spent $10 million advertising arcade ports of Frogger on home consoles such as this one. And not just back in the day, but even up to today, people still remember the game of Frogger and how much fun it was, and how it continues through this day through remakes, sequels, and ports. And the game Frogger is even so popular that Buckner and Garcia, the guys that made the song Pac-Man Fever and the Pac-Man Fever album, dedicated a song to Frogger. Now, Frogger is a game by Konami, and if you buy newer versions of Frogger today, they will say that they're by Konami. But on this card itself, nowhere on it does it say the name Konami or copyright to Konami. It does say Parker Brothers on the back, and it's published by Parker Brothers. They were licensed to have all the console and cartridge ports for the game Frogger. So if you get Frogger on the ColecoVision, the Intellivision, the Commodore 64, or any of the Atari family consoles, you'll be seeing Parker Brothers on it in most cases. And also, if you look at the details on the small print, you can see it says Sega Enterprises. So this is Sega. You might think it's a Sega game, not a Konami game. Well, Sega didn't actually make this game either. Gremlin Industries was an arcade game manufacturer in the late 70s, or the mid 70s as well. And they, at one point in 1978, got bought out by Sega. Okay, we're getting a little bit closer here. So now, Gremlin Industries and Sega were known in some regions as Gremlin Sega or Sega Gremlin. Eventually, now it's just Sega, and Gremlin Industries is done. Now, this is where history gets a little fuzzy. You know, looking back at history this many years later, things get a little mixed up. So if you have any information on this, let me know in the comments below. Because I'm not sure if Gremlin Industries actually made Frogger, or if they just licensed it. I'm thinking that they just licensed it from Konami. They had some games brought over to the United States and North America, and they were localized from Konami, is what I'm thinking. And then Gremlin was bought out by Sega in 1978, so before Frogger, they were already part with Sega. So Gremlin Sega, Sega Gremlin, and now just Sega by the time that Frogger's released. That's why it says Frogger copyright Sega. Now, I don't have the box for this game, and I don't have the manual for this one, so there could be information about Konami in there, but just buying this, you wouldn't think it was a Konami game. It's easy to see why Frogger is an awesome arcade classic and important to video game history. If you're ever in a classic arcade that has Frogger, I highly recommend checking it out, or giving it a try if it's your first time. If you have any of the consoles that receive ports of Frogger's core gameplay, and the basic arcade version of Frogger, I highly recommend checking that out sometime too. It's not one you should miss. Now, I know what you're all thinking. There hasn't been a GAMERpiece Theatre in a very long time. And I'm sorry about that, but I did get sick for a while back last year. Things got pushed aside, things got moved out of the way, and I got a little lost on track of GAMERpiece Theatre, but I do like these videos. I have a lot of fun making these videos, and I really want to thank you for sticking around, watching this entire video, and showing your interest in GAMERpiece Theatre. So that's it for Frogger today on GAMERpiece Theatre. Until next time, stay tuned to Hybrid Games for more classic gaming goodness and more GAMERpiece Theatre. Alright everyone, ribbit!